Hey everyone, Cavedan here for the Faithless Brewing podcast, here for a Pioneer Testing League. We are playing Esper Raffine with Extraction Specialist. This is a list designed by David, and he talked about it in Monday's podcast, along with Emmy. So if you listen to the podcast, I believe that's season 14, episode 13, where they talk through all the theory behind the deck. I just want to see how this deck plays out in practice because it looked very, very cool. The core interaction is Extraction Specialist and Archfiend's Vessel. Let's take a look at Extraction Specialist. It's 2 and a white for a 3/2 human rogue with lifelink. When Extraction Specialist enters, you return target creature with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield, but that creature can't attack or block until the Extraction Specialist is off the table. What's so cool is that Archfiend's Vessel does not actually stay in play. It immediately gives itself over to the demon, exiles itself, and the 5/5 demon token is not subject to the can't attack or block clause of the Extraction Specialist. We've chosen other creatures here that similarly do something even when the Extraction Specialist is preventing them from attacking or blocking. Jace Vryn's Prodigy can happily loot and flip and do all that good stuff. Raffine's Informant gives you at least a loot, although this is more of an attacking creature, and Luminarch Aspirant, if brought back by the Extraction Specialist, can distribute counters and add to your battlefield presence that way. The last card we're really excited about is Raffine herself. Raffine is white, blue, black, 1/4 legendary creature, Sphinx Demon, flying and ward 1. Boy, there's a lot of text on this, but this connive ability is the big draw. Whenever you attack one of your attacking creatures, connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. If you watched some of the Streets of New Capenna Championship, I believe that was 2 weekends ago, you saw that Esper Midrange, featuring often a full playset of Raffine, was one of the top performing decks. It looked very, very impressive, and we are starting to suspect that Raffine is a sleeper hit for Pioneer, possibly even for Modern. So we're very excited to see what Raffine can do. Here, I mean, for starters, she dumps things into the graveyard. We do have to set up this Archfiend Vessel combo some way. But also just the ability to connive while adding battlefield presence. You know, Raffine reminds you a little bit of Luminarch Aspirant, and here is a deck playing both. So potentially we can just get a lot of battlefield presence. So I'm just going to hop into the league here without much further ado. We'll see how it plays out, and then we'll gather our thoughts at the end and see how all of this performed. Alright, we're here for round 1, game 1, and it looks like we're up against Mono Blue Devotion. Mono Blue Devotion supports cards like Master of Waves, Thassa, God of the Sea, and often an endgame fueled by Nykthos Shrine to Nyx and Gadwick the Wizened. So this should be an interesting match. I have not played against Mono Blue Devotion in a very long time. Should be a fun one. Let's play the Raffine on turn 3. It's nice to get some immediate value out of the trigger. Oh, Harbinger of the Tides. Interestingly, the connive ability on Raffine is connive X, and X is checked upon resolution of the ability, so that's why I didn't get to connive at all, because by the time the connive had resolved, my aspirant was already back in my hand. I get to make choices every turn about where to distribute my counters, and I'm going to put them on the Raffine for now, counting on getting there in the air as my ultimate plan for dealing lethal damage. That looks good. Conniving 3 times and drawing into a Fatal Push. So we're going to use the Fatal Push in response to the Glasspool Mimic to make sure that they don't have the option to copy the Harbinger of the Tides. And this Graveyard Trespasser should help with my clock. Ultimately, Mono Blue Devotion is a creature combat-based deck, so if I can just outsize them, get more battlefield presence, this could be a path to victory. Here comes the Thassa, God of the Sea, getting that tap off the Gadwick trigger. So this is an interesting attack for me. I'm wondering if it was a mistake to tap out for the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, because I do get to draw during combat with Raffine's ability, and this is something that I'm going to have to get used to. This is my first time playing with Raffine, so for example, if I had drawn into a Fatal Push during that combat step, I might have regretted the way that I deployed my lands, or used my lands rather. So Gadwick is going to prevent me from hitting with Raffine, and there's no attack to be made here because Thassa has Indestructible. But Wandering Emperor can take down Gadwick now before they get a chance to untap. So opponent is just down to their last card. They just scryed 2 and 1. So I need to talk about this play because this is actually the deciding turn of the game. On my opponent's previous turn, they had cast a Witching Well to scry 2, bottom both cards. On their upkeep, Thassa, God of the Sea, bottom another card. So they were digging, they had no cards in hand. The one card they have now is the card they drew for their turn, an unknown card. But it has flash because of this Leyline of Anticipation. So what I did almost by instinct, as you can see, is I just activated my Hive of the Eye Tyrant, distributed my counters between the Hive, the Aspirant, and the Raffine. Now, this was probably not the best play. I actually had enough that if I had put my Luminarch counter on the Raffine, I would have had 5 damage there, plus a connive for 3, potentially with the ability to discard 3 non-land cards, and then I would be able to have 8 damage in the air off Raffine alone. So I could have done lethal just with Raffine if I put all of my counters, all my eggs in one basket, essentially. But I didn't really think it through. I just instinctively divided up my power and toughness. And as you can see, the card that they drew was Master of Waves, which not only stops my attack, but gives them enough blockers to counterattack me for lethal. So instead of dealing lethal damage in the air, I die on the crackback. This is a bad job by me, but, you know, we're learning. This is our first game with the deck, and against the archetype I have not seen in a while, so getting reminded of how to play against Mono Blue Devotion. Alright, we're back for game 2, having lost game 1 to my own horrific misplay. Let's see if we can do a better job in the second game. We have a nice curve here. Raffine's Informant will come down as a 3-2. It can put the Archfiend's Vessel into the graveyard, which means if on a future turn I find Extraction Specialist, I'll be able to get a 5-5 demon in addition to my 3-3 lifelink. But until that happens, I'm just going to add to the board. My creatures, while not being super impressive, are nevertheless bigger than Mono Blue's creatures. So even just curving out a 3-2 into a 3-3 into a 3-3 should be fine. Now here is an interesting turn. You'll notice that I have a Fabled Passage, a Plains, and a Wandering Emperor in my hand, and I did not check my deck list, but I suspected that I did not have a second white source to fetch with the Fabled Passage. So that's why I didn't cast, or attempt to cast, the Wandering Emperor here, and indeed when I checked later, there was not a second white source. There was only a swamp for me to grab, so I actually don't have 2 white yet. That's okay, we have another Graveyard Trespasser to play. I was not super impressed with the mana throughout this league. Basically, in a Pioneer format without fetch lands, if you want consistent mana, you really need to have a huge number of dual lands, and this list that I'm testing right now has a lot of luxury lands like basics, and here's the Takanuma, there's Hive of the Eye Tyrant as you saw in the last game. But that's okay. My opponent does not put up much resistance, so we're off to game 3. Alright, here we are for game 3 of round 1, the decider, and I have a 1-land hand that I'm going to keep. It's a little bit risky. We have only Hallowed Fountain, but being on the draw, I feel like if I can find any second land, I have enough cheap spells to pay me off, and there we go. There's the Godless Shrine, so the gamble seems to have paid off. Raffine's Informant digs me another card deep, although I have not found the third land yet. But I have enough cheap things in my hand that I think I'll be able to double spell to make up for any stumbles that occur as we're digging for that third land. So I'm going to fire off the Thoughtseize, just because my opponent does not have many cards left in their hand. I want to get something from the Thoughtseize, and I still have enough to Portable Hole and somewhat contest the battlefield that turn. We're discarding Concealed Courtyard because, given my current hand, a tapped land next turn is not super useful. I can already cast everything in my hand, so I'm going to try to win this game by just having better quality of spells. Because my opponent, as you can see, even after casting that Gadwick X=1, they have only the 1 card left in their hand. And we're starting to slowly turn things around. Opponent does not want to trade their Gadwick for the Graveyard Trespasser, so that means that we can go on the offensive this turn. We flip the Werewolf. Luminarch Aspirant means we're now attacking for 7, plus getting this Graveyard Trespasser to drain. And all of a sudden, we are back in this thing. Ooh, a Mystical Dispute. I'm fairly surprised that the opponent has kept that in. We do not play many blue cards at all, but maybe they were afraid of Raffine. There's the Witching Well. Looks like they're digging for a land on their turn and hoping to get some Gadwick triggers. No spell to trigger, so we get a clean attack here for 7. Putting them all the way down to 5. Portable Hole plus March of Otherworldly Light means that the board is clear, and now the opponent will really need to come up with something. That Gadwick, well, if they have a Merfolk Trickster, they're still in it, but if they didn't, ooh, that was a nice draw. So Raffine comes down, gives me an evasive threat, gives me the potential for even more damage this turn, and it looks like the opponent did not draw anything because they concede. Alright, we got game 1. Alright, round 2 of Esper Raffine Extraction Specialist. We have a nice little hand here. And oh, the opponent is starting on a mulligan to 4, and we get to Thoughtseize them as well. Blue-white spirits, so definitely not a deck that is trying to mulligan to 4. Just bad luck for them. Let's hope that we can capitalize and close this game out fairly quickly. As you can see, the Deserted Beach is a little bit awkward. The land count in this deck is not particularly high, and I did really need a turn 2 white source. If I was counting the Deserted Beach as one of my white sources, you can see how I got punished there for not playing just like a pathway or another Hallowed Fountain instead. We're going to fire off these Thoughtseizes while the opponent still has something in their hand, and just based on, you know, their mulligans and what we've drawn, we should be able to win this game just with battlefield presence. Here you see Jace Vryn's Prodigy getting me a flashback on the Fatal Push, and that's more than enough to get the opponent to concede. Alright, on to game 2. Welcome back for game 2, round 2 against Blue-White Spirits. This time we are on the draw, and Blue-White Spirits on the draw is always an extremely dangerous deck. Now, we have to mulligan our opening hand. That's not good. Our 6-card hand is not very good at all. It's terrible curve. I possibly should have mulliganed looking for a 5-card hand, but I thought there was a chance if I, drew the exact right cards that this Extraction Specialist might amount to something, but as you can see, we are not curving out at all. In fact, we have not even found a white mana yet. I don't love Archon of Emeria, but I needed to take out the Thoughtseizes for something, Archon at least blocks a flying creature. That was my thought process there, but I'm not really expecting much out of the Archons in this particular matchup. If you look at the sideboard, we really don't have anything for these blue decks. I'm somewhat surprised that both rounds have been against blue. Oh, there's a Fading Hope. That's devastating. It's looking quite bad for us now, even if we manage to double spell. Oh, this is like here, for example. That was perhaps the best card we could have drawn, the Archfiend's Vessel. Discard it to Jace. Extraction Specialist immediately returns the Archfiend Vessel, gives me that 5/5 Demon. So I'm not out of it yet. This 5/5 can block the 3/5 Supreme Phantom, or could block, I should say, because here comes a Shacklegeist, and now we are in trouble once again. Shacklegeist is going to tap down my 5/5 Demon, and now I am facing lethal next turn. Alright, so we're on our last turn here. Let's just take a look at what our options are. We have drawn a Fatal Push. That was perhaps the best card we could have drawn. We have a second Fatal Push in the graveyard. So if we can get Jace with enough cards to flip, we could potentially cast both Fatal Pushes this turn. We can also gain some life by attacking with this Extraction Specialist to bring us up to 4 or perhaps more damage. If we want to cast Raffine first, we can throw some counters onto the Extraction Specialist to gain even more life on this attack. However, the opponent does have the Selfless Spirit, and given the way that the timing works, you have to activate Jace's -3 at sorcery speed on this Fatal Push in the graveyard, so they will be able to just sack Selfless Spirit once and essentially stop both Fatal Pushes if I try to go for that line. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to cast the Raffine. We're going to try to connive into a second land. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, so we can grow the Extraction Specialist up to 4 power rather. Now we're at 5 life. And as you can see, I opt to not use my last land to cast the Fatal Push. So I had enough to either play the Watery Grave untapped, -3 Jace, and target the Shacklegeist, for example. That would kill the Supreme. That would kill the Selfless Spirit. But it would put me at 3 life and leave me mostly dead. Instead, I went for a tapped Watery Grave and a -2 with the Jace Telepath Unbound to just shrink one of these attackers. I think I shrank the Spectral Sailor, although that might have been a mistake. Now, we're still probably dead here because the opponent just needs to connect with 2 creatures, right? They have a 3/5 Supreme Phantom, a 3/3 Shacklegeist, a 3/2 Selfless Spirit. Any 2 of these will kill me. I have 2 blockers, so they need to find any 3 creatures, basically. Shacklegeist will allow any 3 creatures plus the Spectral Sailor, or any 2 creatures rather, plus the Spectral Sailor will be enough to tap both my blockers and deal lethal. Let's see if they find it. Selfless Spirit, that's 1. That's bad. Okay, there goes the Shacklegeist. Nope, correction. They only needed to get through with 2. So yeah, 1 creature was enough. Maybe I should have taken a different line. I'm wondering if I had gone back and played the Watery Grave untapped, played the Fatal Push right away to get that Selfless Spirit off the table. Would that have changed the math for me? But I don't think it would have. I think we were just a little bit too far behind given our clunky start. On to Game 3 of Round 2 against Blue-White Spirits. We are on the play this time, and we're hoping for a faster hand, because as we saw last game, even though I did have some comeback potential, I really don't want to fall too far behind. And once again, I'm getting punished by this Deserted Beach. Just being a tap land on turn 1 means that I could not cast my turn 1 Fatal Push into a turn 2 Luminarch Aspirant. I had to choose. I think it was ultimately correct. Unlicensed Hearse coming down is going to stop what would have been an extremely sweet line. I mean, this is one of the best possible lines for the deck. Turn 2 Raffine's Informant, discard Archfiend's Vessel, turn 3 Extraction Specialist. That would have been such a beautiful line. It would have given me a 3/2 lifelink and a 5/5. But Unlicensed Hearse came down and put a stop to all of that. we're just going to try to add board presence here. They do not have anything to crew the Unlicensed Hearst, so if I can just get ahead on board with large creatures, same plan we used against Mono Blue Devotion, I think that putting the Spirit Stack on the back foot should give me a reasonable line to win, but that depends on how many lords they find and if they find any more timely Fading Hopes. Alright, so they're opting to just trade their Selfless Spirit straight up. Unlicensed Hearst is growing, but they have not actually crewed it yet. This has been interesting, seeing a lot of decks bringing this Unlicensed Hearst in from the sideboard. It's very commonly played these days in Pioneer, but I don't see it crewed very often. So I am starting to wonder, like, how good is it in a matchup like this where, I like having the graveyard, but I don't need the graveyard per se. So we have the opponent down to 3, but they are rapidly accumulating creatures, so the onus is on us to really force them to trade things off. I no longer have any flying attackers, so this hearse is going to be a problem. Oh, thank goodness. Never mind. We found the portable hole. So that's just going to clean up this hearse immediately. I'm going to take down the hearse instead of the Shacklegeist, because I believe that I can just force trades in combat now that they don't have a large ground creature. In fact, I'm even going to trade a 2-2 Luminarch Aspirant for the 2-2 Spectral Sailor, simply because Graveyard Trespasser and Wandering Emperor have enough firepower by themselves to really put the pressure on the Spirit Stack. And yeah, they concede just to the Graveyard Trespasser without even seeing the Wandering Emperor. So here's a match where Extraction Specialist just being a large lifelinking creature means that I'm ahead in combat. And we're 2-0 now. Let's go on to round 3. And we're back for round 3 with Esper Raffine Extraction Specialist. Despite a few stumbles in the first couple rounds, we are so far unscathed with a 2-0 record. Let's see if we can keep that going in round 3. Well, this hand cannot cast any spells, but did I know that when I kept the hand? Not necessarily. Magic Online, for some reason, defaults to these Innistrad double feature all black lands, and it really just looks like a swamp. But if you look very closely, it's not actually a swamp, and I'm not sure that I knew that when I kept this hand, because woof, this hand looks bad. In fact, I debated not even discarding the Archfiend Vessel, because now I show the opponent what I'm doing. As soon as I discard the Archfiend Vessel, they know that I'm up to some graveyard shenanigans. But I thought, well, why not give it a chance? I have the Extraction Specialist. If I happen to draw a third land, maybe I can climb back into this game. But yeah, I bricked, and I'm just going to scoop this up now to not have to, well, endure the pain or give too much more information away. Let's just go to game 2 and hope for a better outcome. Alright, round 3, game 2, against what looked like blue-red Prowess. They had a Gigantha companion. I didn't show it here in the replay. Despite not really casting anything last game, I expect them to have cards like Sprite Dragon, maybe some Prowess creatures. It's also possible that they're on a more controlling build, but I found that the more controlling builds will often have cards like Dig Through Time or Temporal Trespasser, which preclude you from playing Gigantha. There's that Shredder, so I'm regretting discarding a land now because my Raffine's Informant is only a 2-1. If you connive and you do not discard a non-land, you do not get any bonus. So we're a little low on action. As you can see, here's that Raffine's Tower, a land that we thought would be important for Esper as a strategy, but the fact remains that if you are in a curve-out deck, if you're a deck that's playing to the battlefield, a Shock and Pathway mana base is just a lot cleaner. Like, any Pathway here would have let me cast Wandering Emperor on curve, whereas Raffine's Tower, despite being a quote-unquote smoother card, doesn't really help me that much. I just had to take a turn off, essentially, to play it on turn 4. There's a Sprite Dragon. Okay, so the opponent has negate, a spell pierce in their graveyard. They cast a strangle on the graveyard trespasser. They're not too worried about card advantage. I imagine a treasure cruise is coming at some point, and oh, that's punishing. A second spell pierce to stop my Wandering Emperor, and now I'm in just a boatload of trouble. Can't Stay Away is a decent draw, gets back the graveyard trespasser, but we are already way behind. They've got 6 power in the air. I have to give them another power by triggering their Ledger Shredder just to cast an Archfiend's Vessel in the hopes of finding something. I'm not even sure if I should have cast the Vessel. And yeah, a Fiery Impulse is going to take down my graveyard trespasser, and that is more than enough for them to deal lethal damage in the air. Treasure Cruise. Yeah, this is a landslide victory for the Izzet deck. Not a great showing for us this round. Alright, round 4. After that shameful performance against Izzet, let's see if we can muster something a little more powerful in the 4th round. This is a decent hand. It has my quote-unquote combo of Archfiend Vessel plus Extraction Specialist, but without any discard outlets, without Jace or Raffine's Informant or Raffine herself, I'm going to take a gamble and just cast the Archfiend's Vessel. There's a chance that if they're a red deck, they'll have to kill it in combat, and if all else fails, I can Fatal Push my own Vessel, as you see me doing here, to cast my Extraction Specialist quote-unquote on curve. Not a tremendous use of resources, but my Thoughtseize show me that the opponent was indeed on just a blue-white control, actually Jeskai control. And as you can see from their hand here, Fateful Absence, Wandering Emperor, Shark Typhoon, Otawara, things are looking bad for me given that I have not drawn much action. The Wandering Emperor neutralizes the threats. In fact, they could have even, if I were playing that, I might have just Wandering Emperor made my Shark a 2/2 first strike to kill the Extraction Specialist for free, and then you could even just -2. So I walked into a blowout. They didn't even need the full blowout. They just cast Supreme Verdict to clear the board, and as you can see, I have nothing going on right now. I have not drawn much beyond my opening hand. I've drawn just an additional Fatal Push and an additional Archfiend's Vessel. Not the cards you want to see. This is really where you rely on the connive portion of the deck, the looting portion of the deck, to smooth things out, but the opponent has a Narset, so even if I draw a connive effect, that's not even going to help me here. This is looking very bad indeed. Pretty much anything will finish me off from this position. Oh, there's a Teferi Hero of Dominaria. This is well over. Let's just see if we draw anything. And we draw a land. I think that's plenty. Let's just go to game 2. Alright, round 4, game 2. We are down a game against a Jeskai control deck, and these matchups are always a little bit concerning coming from the side of the Esper Midrange player, because midrange tends to get devoured by control. You're not quite fast enough to wait on speed, and the longer the game goes, your card quality is just going to come back to hurt you. So I used the Thoughtseize to take their March of Otherworldly Light, but they had a second copy. As you can see, they had a Blood Sun, a Dovin's Veto, and the second March. Here comes a Blood Sun, so it looks like at some point they are going to play a Lotus Field. They haven't drawn it yet, but they have maybe a big mana strategy with cards like Shark Typhoon, I imagine, Teferi 5, which we already saw. Oh, there's a Wandering Emperor. So here I'm glad to have drawn one of my big cards, namely Wandering Emperor. I can kill their Wandering Emperor. I use Vanishing Verse, trade off these 2 Samurai and make another Samurai, so I'm ahead on board, and I know that they only have a Dovin's Veto in hand. But even though this looks like just a simple turn, it was actually a pretty crucial turn just in the choice of whether to use Vanishing Verse or Noxious Grasp. I think I had to kill their Wandering Emperor. The question was, do I want to save the Verse or save the Grasp? Now, I was thinking if they play Teferi Hero of Dominaria, the Vanishing Verse cannot kill that, so I want to save my Noxious Grasp. Unfortunately, they immediately hardcast a Shark Typhoon, and now I have a useless Noxious Grasp in hand, whereas if I'd saved the Vanishing Verse, I could have taken out the Shark Typhoon and maybe closed off all angles of attack. So what happens? Well, the opponent has no cards in hand. They untap with a Shark Typhoon, they draw for their turn, and it is Expressive Iteration, the worst possible card for me that they could have drawn. They're going to get a 2/2 Shark, they're going to find potentially 2 more spells, and go from nothing to just having a devastating board presence. Yep, they found a Lotus Field. Oh, they found a Narset. This is terrible for me. That's another Shark. Narset finds another spell, it finds a Fateful Absence, and just like that, they went from having nothing to having 3 Sharks in play, and Narset to turn off any of my potential draws. I still can't even crack this clue on my turn because of the Narset. I basically don't have any good attacks now. I can just trade down and hope that they draw nothing, but with the Narset activation still alive, this is looking very bad for me. I basically needed to fade a turn. I needed them to not draw anything for 1 turn for the Shark Typhoon, but that's not how it went down. There is such a fairy, so I was not totally crazy to keep the Noxious Grasp, but I just needed cards to come up in a slightly different order. This is looking like quickly falling out of range for me. I no longer have realistic attacks. I cannot even activate these Hives of the Eye Tyrant because the Blood Sun removes that ability. So, as you can see, this will not take long. The opponent is mercifully killing me quickly, and that's it. Another 0-2 defeat at the hands of Jeskai Blood Sun Control. Alright, round 5. After a 2-0 start, we have fallen to 2-2. Let's see if we can close out this league on a brighter note against onlylands.com. That's very cute. We have what looks to be a good curve, but once again, you see the awkwardness in the mana. Look at this hand. Deserted Beach, Castle Locked Lane, Watery Grave. We do not actually have the ability to cast our Luminarch Aspirant on turn 2, which is one of the lines we'd hope for. Archfiend Vessel into Luminarch Aspirant ought to be a reasonable start, provided that we're not hamstringing ourselves by our choice of lands. So opponent has revealed a Giganta Companion. Looks like they are on the same Is It Prowess deck that is so popular these days, the same one that defeated us in round 3, but this time the opponent does not have a second land, as we saw off our Thoughtseize. They just had more cantrips and a couple of red removal spells. We have our combo, quote-unquote combo, Extraction Specialist, getting back the Archfiend's Vessel, so we can potentially put our foot to the gas here and just try to close this game out before the opponent gets off their feet with cantrips looking for lands. We're just going to dump a bunch of counters in play. Let's get the Extraction Specialist up to 4/3 lifelink, and a 6/6 Demon in the air should prevent the opponent from doing anything outside of exactly a bounce spell. They're going to clear off the Luminarch Aspirants, but yeah, we have plenty of gas now. We force a chump block here, put them down to 4, here comes a Graveyard Trespasser, and that's all she wrote. Up a game in round 5, we are going into game 2 against Is It Prowess. Definitely benefited last game from the opponent not having a second land, but as you saw, despite somewhat awkward mana stumbles with our Deserted Beach, we did have a pretty powerful hand. This deck has proven itself capable of some impressive starts just on the back of cards like Luminarch Aspirant, Graveyard Trespasser, and that Wombo combo of Extraction Specialist returning the Archfiend's Vessel. Another Unlicensed Hearse, so there will not be any Graveyard shenanigans for me this time. I've already used one of my portable holes. There are only 2 of them in the sideboard. This card has been consistently impressive for me. I'm starting to think that I should not register any white decks without access to at least 4 portable holes. The Graveyard Trespasser is going to work on their graveyard. Unfortunately, Unlicensed Hearse can target the exact same cards that my Graveyard Trespasser ability was targeting, so I will not gain any incidental life, assuming that the opponent is content to use their Hearse that way. I'm going to have to find another route to victory, and it's looking like Raffine is my best bet for doing so. I've still got more power, just raw power, than the opponent, in the form of Raffine and Wandering Emperor still to come. Ooh, there's that Treasure Cruise. Okay, so this could change quickly. The situation is very much up in the air, so we're going to need some good draws, and that was a nice draw right there, the March of Otherworldly Light. Unfortunately, because I have a discard during combat, there's no chance of getting the Can't Stay Away. March of Otherworldly Light, even if I targeted the Unlicensed Hearst, they would have had time to respond by eating either my Can't Stay Away or the reanimation target. So there was not really a benefit to trying to get value out of that Can't Stay Away there. That being said, I think this Wandering Emperor, assuming it resolves, should clean up the board nicely. In fact, I'm going to take a risk and let the opponent potentially attack me once again with a hearse just to kill their last creature. So now the hearse is not doing anything unless they find a second creature here. And this should give me a window to potentially just close the game out in the air. This is looking good here. I do not think the opponent can kill me because I have this Insurance Fatal Push. Let's see what they find, though, off the Expressive Iteration. It's a Soulscar Mage. It's a Play with Fire. Oh, okay, so they're killing my blocker. This allows the Soulscar to crew a 10/10 Unlicensed Hearse. Unfortunately for the opponent, I am at 11, and I have this Fatal Push, so they will not be hitting me to 1 and putting me in range, even if they happen to draw a Play with Fire. That was a good line from the opponent. They found a line that gave them a chance to win. Unfortunately for them, fortunately for us, we had more than enough to defend ourselves and let this gorgeous 7-power Raffine close out the game. So that's it. 2-0 win, redemption against Is It Prowess, and we finished out the league 3-2. So we finished our league 3-2. Closing thoughts on this version of the deck. I really liked Raffine Scheming Seer as a card. As you saw from the games, every time that we drew it, it added a meaningful amount of board presence. The card selection was more than even I was prepared for. I think a couple of times just casting Raffine, attacking with a connive of 2 or 3, meant that I had the option to draw into a Fatal Push or a Wandering Emperor mid-combat, and I even hadn't really grasped that until it happened and realized too late that I had not played a land before combat. So there's definitely choices to make in any kind of connive deck. Connive is such an interesting mechanic in that way. The Extraction Specialist and Archfiend's Vessel 1-2 punch definitely added a lot of power. You know, we managed to pull it off several times, even though the Archfiend Vessel by itself was quite a weak card. Outside of exactly Extraction Specialist and this one copy of Can't Stay Away, the Archfiend Vessel didn't really do anything. Extraction Specialist was pretty solid just as a 3-2 lifelink for 3. Cards like Jace, like Luminarch Aspirant, even Raffine's Informant are all theoretically possible to get back off the Extraction Specialist for value, quote-unquote, but really it was mostly a question of, given the matchups we faced, adding pressure to the battlefield, winning the battlefield, winning the red zone, forcing trades the opponent didn't want. There's no straight-up card advantage in the deck outside of exactly Extraction Specialist, so it's just a matter of, you know, having higher card quality through cards like the Trespasser, like Raffine, like Wandering Emperor, and just winning on sheer size alone. Didn't have much, or rather, I should say, I didn't love the mana base too much, didn't have much love for the mana base. You saw several games where just cards like Deserted Beach, like these basic lands, or the Castle Lochthwain or whatever, were punishing me somewhat. I have not run the numbers on this, but I do think we do need to replace at least 5 of these single color lands with more shock lands, more pathways. At the end of the day, this is an aggro deck, although we call it a mid-range deck. It's really trying to curve out even as early as turn 1 and just add a creature to the board every single turn. So Raffine's Tower felt a little bit out of place. Basically any tap land was punishing, including this Fabled Passage. So I think going back for another round, I would definitely lean more towards a pathway shock mana base and maybe draw my inspiration from Naya Winota in that respect. The sideboard could use some work. I did not find a good matchup for these Fiend Slayer Paladins. Although they have some form of protection from red and black, it's not true protection, and the red decks these days can simply get like a Soulscar Mage or a Monastery Swiftbeer, and that will just simply outclass the Fiendslayer Paladin in combat. So I think the idea that David had when he proposed this card was that with Raffine, with Luminarch Aspirant, we can put counters onto it and make it more of a threat. That's the same thought process that went behind playing the full set of Archfiend's Vessel. But I did not find any occasion to bring these in. Similarly, these Archons, maybe they're more of an anti-combo card. In the matchups that I brought them in, they didn't really do much. Portable Holes were one of my best cards. I think a full playset is necessary. And basically, in the matchups where Portable Hole is good, Thoughtseize is bad. So I would even go so far as to play all 4 Portable Holes in the sideboard for a direct swap with a Thoughtseize, or even just move some Portable Holes to the main deck. In terms of tweaks to make, David did send me an updated list. Unfortunately, I had already joined the league by the time that I saw this, so I just had to play it out with the earlier build. But the next build of the deck might look something like this. This is David's suggested update based on his initial testing with the same list that I was playing here. As you can see, he has cut the Thoughtseizes and instead replaced them with Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. I mean, he's basically thinking that you don't need Thoughtseize main deck anymore. So whereas the list that we played had 4 Thoughtseize main, 3 to rest side, anticipating more of a need for this, it's possible that the Pioneer metagame right now doesn't require so many discard effects. So you just don't play any Thoughtseizes in game 1, focus on getting on the board quickly, providing a little disruption from Thalia, and then you can see that he's even gone so far as to put in Blood-Soaked Champion. So now there's 8 1-drops that get on the board quickly, start picking up counters from these Luminarch Aspirants. And the Blood-Soaked Champion is nice because it gives you a little more value out of discarding with Raffine's Informant or Raffine herself. I think we both like Raffine. You can see he has gone up to 4 copies here in his update. 4 Extraction Specialist, I mean, these are the powerful cards. Raffine, Extraction Specialist, and, well, Archfiend's Vessel, I suppose. I was happy with Graveyard Trespasser. I know it's one of David's favorite cards. I'm a little surprised that he's proposing going down to 2 in the main deck to make room for a Skyclave Apparition. But in principle, I mean, this deck is on the same plan. You see he's cut the Wandering Emperors to just go even more creature-focused. I think if you're playing Thalias, you don't really want to pay 5 or a Wandering Emperor. So Thalia is a gamble. I don't know that we've seen a ton of Thalia decks, but it is one way to build out the Raffine Extraction Specialist Archfiend Vessel package, and I think it might be worth testing. So I might come back incorporating some of these main deck changes, definitely rebuilding the mana base along the lines that I described, and maybe rethinking the sideboard. But I enjoyed this deck a lot. I think Raffine is a hidden gem. Extraction Specialist has impressed so far. Not so sure about Archfiend's Vessel. I think we need a few more ways to make it useful. One possibility that was suggested was to play like Stitcher Supplier alongside the Archfiend's Vessel so that we can actually find it more often, and that encourages us to play cards like Deadly Dispute or Village Rites to get things out of this. That takes us away from the aggro plan a little bit and moves us back towards midrange. There's a lot of choices and branching decision trees to make. You could even add the Greasefang Parhelion package to this if you go that route. On the other hand, this list that David is proposing here is not too vulnerable to graveyard hate at all, which is a virtue for sure in the current Pioneer climate. So I think that's it for now. We may test this updated version. If so, if people like this deck, let me know, leave a comment, and we'll see if I can get a little more gameplay up with the updated version. Similarly, as you can see, I've added commentary over the replays for this video. This is just more experimenting with the format, trying to make these replays helpful for you. So if you watched all the way to the end here, thank you very much. We'd appreciate that like if you want to hit that bell or whatever it is. I'm new to YouTube, so click those buttons, that will help us. But more importantly, leave a comment and let me know what you would like to see. If you prefer more pauses, more talking through individual plays within the games. I didn't do too much of that here because I think I was more interested in just in a more concise way showing you how the deck plays out, and in a certain way I don't put too much emphasis on the gameplay when I'm testing a deck for the first time on the tactics of a given turn. But if that's something that you would like to hear more of, if you'd like to hear more of my thinking about why I made a particular play at a particular time, I could certainly consider that for a future video like this. So just let me know in the comments. I'm very much interested in iterating and improving and helping to make this Faithless Brewing YouTube channel something that you all want to see. So that's going to do it for today. Take care. We'll see you next time.